Hello, Sid. Welcome to the DoingCXRight show.
Thank you, Stacy. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Well, it's going to be a fun topic and so educational for learners, and they're going to find out very shortly. But beforehand, let's discuss, who are you? What do you do for a living?
So, my name is Sid Banerjee. I am the Chief Strategy Officer at Medallia, one of the, I'm sure you know, leading companies out there that provides customer experience solutions for companies large and small around the globe.
I do know it well. I used Medallia, so I was your customer, and now advocating and enjoying all of the education that you put out there. What's a fun fact people might not know about you personally or professionally?
I'll give you a quick professional fun fact. So this is obviously not my first rodeo here in customer experience here with Medallia. I actually have about almost 20-year career. Started a company back in the early 2000s called Clarabridge, which was a pioneer in the kind of speech and text analytics space for customer experience. We worked with many companies, including your old company, Verizon, back in the day. We sold the business to another CX company called Qualtrics back in 2021. So I worked over there for a few years. And then ultimately, after what was a failed retirement, was persuaded to come back into the CX space and join Medallia to help kind of build and evolve the company and the platform for the future.
Oh, I love all of that history and how it keeps evolving and building on itself, which is just in CX style.
Exactly. CX is never done. I mean, a CX practitioner's job is never done. So
no, I agree with you. So on that note, doing customer experience right, when I say that to you, what does that mean?
So I think there's a lot of complexity in doing customer experience right now, even more so than there was 5 or 10 years ago. And I think it's partly because the evolution of customer experiences has been so dramatic. If you go back 10 or 15 years ago, most experiences were very single channel, and they are now very much omni-channel. They were very much solicited feedback when, in the not too distant past, most people were willing to or at least a reasonable number of people are willing to give feedback through surveys or online reviews and other things. But there's been really a proliferation of channels for communication and customer experiences. There's also been a proliferation of ways to capture customer experiences. And so to do CX right today, you really need to have a much more, I think, expansive view of where are your customers, how are they interacting with you? If the interaction itself is digital or capturable, how can you analyze that information to make sense of really good and bad experiences, good and bad journeys? And then lastly, and probably most importantly, how do you activate on those insights so that you actually can drive continuous improvement? CX isn't just about tracking a metric, right? It's really about using insights to drive actions. And the last thing I'll say is with AI nowadays, there are all kinds of interesting ways to kind of use the artificial intelligence technology to come up with ideas to actually take actions and even to create, in some cases, automations. So it's a dynamic field. And actually, what's one of the reasons why I'm still in it is I'm just excited by all the innovation that's happening right now.
I'm really glad you brought up journey because so many people think about just customer service, that point in the journey where you get help. But that's short-sighted because there is a whole entire learn, buy, get, use, pay part of that. And so I think it's essential what you're bringing up and to me, part of doing CX right. And I'm excited to actually learn and share and get to know people at your event coming up. Tell us a little bit about that in March.
Sure. So Medallia is hosting its annual user conference. It's called Experience 25, March 24th through 26th in lovely Las Vegas at the Wynn Hotel. And it'll be a great opportunity really for at least three important things. One, you'll get a chance to network and meet with all of our fellow customers and partners. Two, there'll be opportunities to speak with experts, practitioners, and customers who've actually set up great world-class programs and guided customer experience technologies and solutions. And then three, and this is near and dear to my heart, we're going to be really laying out our innovation agenda for Medallia. Where do we expect and want to help our customers take CX going forward with new technologies, new solutions, and driving better outcomes for their customers?
And I'm really looking forward to being there. So much more on that. Let's get to the problems
Sure.
that people are facing. So customer churn, it's expensive. And the cost of running customer care operations, it's going up.
Yeah.
And many are stuck in this cycle where they're reacting to the issues instead of really preventing them. So talk to us about why. Why is that? And what's getting in the way of delivering customer excellence?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an evolving consensus happening, I think, among some of the more leading edge practitioners of customer experience that the way things were done, maybe over the last 5 or 10 years, is really not the way to do things going forward. When you had a largely analog world, the only way that you could get a good signal on your customer experience was to solicit feedback, to ask a customer after an experience, how did I do? How likely are you to recommend me based on my experience? And while that is a good indicator, it is not a leading indicator to your point. It's more of a lagging indicator. At the point that a customer is actually giving feedback after a bad experience, the bad experience has already happened. And the opportunity to intervene in real time or to track something as it's happening is much less actionable from feedback after the fact. To prevent churn, I think there's 2 things you need to do, and you need to do them proactively. One is think about, to your point, the journey. And the journey is not just about touch points with the customer to the company. It's product experience. It's sales experience when someone's not yet a customer. And it's service experience when someone is trying multiple times to answer a question or solve a problem. And to the extent that you're tapping into those experiences in a native way, oftentimes those experiences can be captured through phone calls or online chats or even digital experiences when people are traversing a web page to try to buy something or try to self-service something. Pulling in those signals gives you a much better sense of what's happening before that final touch point that could be a churn event, right? And so you want to be able to tap into those journeys and use signals that aren't necessarily solicited, but are actually experiential in the moment. That's the first thing. The second thing is, because that's a lot of big data, you have to have the technology to basically distill insights and trends from all that information. This is where, historically machine learning, nowadays large language model-based AI is really good at not just capturing the raw data, but distilling it down into what is the product issue? What is the service issue? What is the failed attempt that's actually causing a customer to have a bad experience? And then most importantly, what is the kind of qualitative marker of that experience, the emotion, the effort, the negative sentiment attributed to the specific experience or product issue that they're having. Pulling all of that data together and making sense of it gives you leading indications before a bad event. And if you can then fix the problem upstream of the bad experience that triggers the churn, you can prevent the churn to begin with. So it's really about getting early warning signals and doing that in a more omni-channel way, not just waiting for the bad event and then trying to avoid it or mitigate it at the time.
So it's getting ahead of it. It's preventative.
Correct.
And then when you do get that, I think there's also a really important point. Having had the technology and the solution to enable that, you also need a culture that stops doing this,
Correct.
Pointing fingers that it's somebody else's problem.
That's right. I think it's important when you think about CX to think about 2 sides of the coin, right? There's the customer side, which is what is the customer experiencing and how are they doing along that journey? But there's also the who is the actor that's responsible for the action of fixing the problem. And when we think about CX programs, we want to look at both sides of that. In most organizations, for instance, there is the sales owner, there is the marketing owner, there is the service owner, there's the product owner, right? And in the case of frontline experiences, there's the location manager or workforce manager for the locations. Any experience from any channel could contain insights for any one of those personas. So it's important to tease out the insight, both at the individual customer experience, but also at the aggregate, all the customers that have a product or a frontline or a service experience, and basically summarize and distill that insight for the owner who can take action. And so there's partly getting the information in the right form factor to the right person. And there's also a culture of action, right? Which is to say, when I get that feedback, it's my responsibility as an owner inside the company to assess it, to identify the best way to deal with it, and then to take action to fix the issue if it's a product or a service problem to resolve.
Yeah. So those that are in customer experience roles, as I've been,
Mhm.
they, we get to be the glue that brings all the organizations together for that
That's
unified approach.
that's exactly right. You act as the, if you will, the aggregator of the insight and essentially the distiller of the recommendations for actions. You may not, if you're a CX practitioner, be the person that takes that final step. But I think it's really important for any CX practitioner to think of their jobs not just as collecting data and coming up with insights, but making sure those insights are translated to action. And ultimately, by the way, that is how a CX program drives value to an organization, right? I like to think about, and I say this almost like a mantra every time I have the opportunity, but a CX program should be measured not just in terms of a tracking index like NPS or loyalty or satisfaction, but really in terms of, am I driving efficiency, right? Long journeys are expensive and they're frankly problematic for customers. Make them short, efficient, to the point. Revenue, right? Revenue, which is, am I driving more top line loyalty and protection of the customer relationship?
Mhm.
The third is, and this isn't something that a lot of companies think about, but I encourage them to, is, am I reducing risk, right? Because oftentimes a bad experience isn't just a negative experience for the customer and a costly service or support experience for the company. It can create risk. It can create regulatory risk, financial risk, or even operational risk, right? People having safety or other kinds of issues. Reducing risk can have a huge financial benefit to the company. And then the fourth, which is a little bit more nebulous, but oftentimes when companies are making big bets, right? It might be rolling out a new digital journey or, coming up with new product launches or trying to have a successful holiday shopping campaign. Those are investments that they make during those times. It's super important to be making sure that you have almost a war room type approach to making sure you're not letting anything go wrong. Think about CX in terms of maximizing the positive outcomes along cost, revenue, risk, and kind of big bets. That's when you ultimately have payback on your CX programs.
Oh, that's a mic drop. Love that.
Boom.
Yes. And it's also, my book is coming out next month, and it's all about that journey management, which is more
Mhm.
than journey mapping.
Yes.
And it's important that people understand that getting people into a room and just whiteboard, you have people from marketing, you have people from the e-commerce and sales and payroll and all these divisions. If you bring people together, they understand the domino effect of how they have a customer experience role. And because the CX person or team can't do it in isolation.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I'll give you just one or two kind of random examples, but in past lives working with healthcare providers, that when a customer is having a bad digital journey, they can't sign up for a policy or identify a primary care physician, they will call the contact center, and the customer care rep may do a wonderful job handling the inquiry. But at the end of the day, the insight is, make the website easier to navigate, make it easier to find your in-network doctor. Another great example is when people come up with new products, right? The product itself, if it's poorly marketed or the messaging around the product doesn't align with the reality of the experience, that can create a product experience gap. That's insight that needs to go back to the product marketers and the product owners. So it's all about making sure that the right information gets to the right person so that you don't just locally optimize an individual experience, you really globally optimize the relationship of the customer with the company they're doing business with.
Mm. I'd add that once you do get that feedback
Mhm.
from the structured surveys to unstructured social media, as an example, when you have that, and leaders listen to this, you get that, but you have to close the loop,
Yes.
right? So talk a little bit about closing the loop, because if they don't do that, then this is wasted effort.
Yeah, I think, and there's a couple of different, even there, I think the way that people think about closing the loop is evolving right now. Historically, closing the loop meant, if I have a good experience, I thank the customer for their loyalty. If they have a bad experience, you try to remediate with some follow-up. And I think that's still a very important way to close the loop on an individual customer basis. The outer loop experience, closed loop, is really about identifying a set of issues associated with a bad product or a bad service or a bad digital experience, and then identifying and actioning that item back to someone to fix, which is often inside the company. That's a kind of closed loop as well. But I think there's a third type of closed loop, which you're going to start seeing coming from companies like Medallia and others in the very near future. And that is using experiences to drive essentially automations, right? But the difference between automations that I think you're going to see coming forward and the way that people thought about automations in the past was most automations were done with very, very kind of, I would think of them as almost left brain assessments of what's going on, the issue, the owner, the action, and they tend to be very kind of programmatic, almost hard-coded. With AI today, you can actually pick up on the emotional side of a customer experience and tailor the action and the automation to be empathetic. If someone's had a really bad experience, you can actually make sure that you focus on the negative and the most emotionally affecting. You can focus on the things that correlate to churn. And then you can also use those automations to drive not just responses back to customers, but even take an action between an experience system and another system of record, a CRM system, a marketing system, an order management system, a refund or credit system. And I think you're going to start to see CX customer experiences being less about the human is in the loop all the time from the customer perspective, and where there's a high confidence action to be taken, the system will recommend and then maybe even take that action. And I don't think that's too far afield. Think of it as CXPA, customer experience process automation. That is going to be another kind of inner loop and outer loop capability in the future.
Oh, we could spend an hour just on that topic.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting field. There's a lot going on. I'm actually kind of excited to help companies innovate with this type of approach going forward. Because again, the technology is starting to become really, really powerful nowadays for driving understanding, prediction, recommendation, and then now automation.
Yeah. You have on the website a couple different case studies proving that what you're talking about really is profitable and important. Does any come to your mind of a company that's really doing CX right, a real world example and impact?
Oh, yeah, there are many. At the risk of not getting my marketing people in trouble, I'm not going to say anything that isn't necessarily marketing approved. But I will say that just off the top of my head, there are a few really good examples. We have a company in the kind of the restaurant retail space that's using kind of CX listening technologies at scale to really understand how well their company is doing supporting customer inquiries into the contact center, and using this to define agent quality metrics and provide coaching to make sure that the folks answering the phone are continuously improving and actually driving better outcomes for their customers. We have very large banks across the US and Europe that are basically using a combination of social and survey and even chat feedback to basically optimize the way that the customer experiences the bank on digital, in location, and in the contact center. And what they're trying to do is, first of all, make sure that they're introducing positive experiences and reducing that kind of operational risk I mentioned, but also making sure that every frontline employee, whether they be in a contact center or in a branch bank location, is driving the best possible experiences. And if not, they're remediating through closing the loop. And I could give many others. A great tech company is using this to maximize kind of customer support in the sales process. Whether you're selling, whether you're marketing, whether you're handling a commerce solution or you're handling a frontline transaction, these are all great opportunities for a company to really tap into the voice of the customer and create good outcomes and to reduce negative outcomes. And if there are negative outcomes, to drive continuous improvement.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that, which is voice of customer. One of the companies I was at, our team was paying attention to the voice of the customer, the feedback, and that is how we knew when they were buying online, e-commerce, and picking up at store, offline retail, that they were very frustrated because when they got to the retail store and they had already paid, they would get there and they had to wait on the line.
Yes.
And they were angry. And so because of the platforms allowing us to know what's happening, we were able to create a separate queue for people to just come in, pick up their product and leave, not have to wait. And the retail team had intelligence to say, oh, the customer bought this. Well, we can upsell, cross-sell that?
Yes. Actually, you bring up a good point. And COVID, I think I know who that retailer is. I'm sure there are others. But during COVID, there was a lot of companies trying to create these hybrid shopping experiences. And many of them used customer experience feedback to drive continuous improvement in that process. Whether it was, having a digital shop, in-person pickup, having the dedicated lines, actually driving intelligent upsell during the digital,
Right.
and then actually driving people back to kind of review and kind of reinforce those experiences online. You can start to create a virtuous cycle of improvement and of customer loyalty when you're listening to your customers. That's a great example of a strategic transformation. And now most large retailers have created these hybrid experiences because they've realized that's what customers want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to measurements for a second. So there are so many different ways to measure. And obviously there's the traditional, the NPS. If you're not doing anything, that's an easy way to start. Satisfaction, that could be good. That could be mediocre, in my opinion. What are other things that people can do to know, how do you gauge?
Yeah, I think this is interesting too. The metrics that you capture have been evolving, I think, over the last few years. Again, in the early days, you had two primary survey metrics, right? There was sort of an LTR, likely to recommend score, NPS type score. You might have a satisfaction index. Those are explicit answers to explicit questions, and they can be useful as tracking metrics. I think that's important. But when you start to get into digital or conversational signals, there's a lot more, if you will, features you can extract using AI from those signals. In conversational signals, you're dealing with language. And so you often look for things like emotion markers. Emotion has a high correlation to loyalty. Effort markers have an even higher correlation to loyalty. If someone says something is hard or requires repeat attempts to resolve, and that comes up in the language of customer interactions, you've got to focus on those things because those are the things that ultimately are going to cause someone at some renewal event or customer transition event to just say, forget it. I'm canceling this relationship with this company. And then the third thing from a sales and marketing perspective is looking for intents. Like what is someone, and this is also true in servicing, what is someone trying to do? Am I intending to return a product or solve a problem or answer a question? Those intents can become very, very powerful when you correlate them to the thing that is the intent, right? If I'm intending to return a product, what is the product? Why is it being returned? If I'm intending to ask a question, what are the questions? Those are customer education opportunities and marketing opportunities. Or if I'm intending to cancel my subscription or my relationship, why, right? Those are the things that give you good sales insight and loyalty insights. So we are very much in favor of, obviously, use the trackers, right? Because that's important for lagging indication, but use the intents, the emotions, the effort markers from language to really understand the why. And those often can be predictive of a longer term problem if they're not resolved. I have one final thing on this, and that is when you get into digital experiences, again, this is where you're actually tracking web sessions and how people interact on mobile devices or on websites. There's a way to, with a machine, read those sessions as well and understand where is someone going on a journey online? Where are they getting stuck? Where are they showing emotion? Running around on a web page and moving your mouse a lot. That's a frustration marker. Pausing and kind of moving your mouse back and forth means you're not sure what to do. Those can be good usability cues and good navigation cues to help improve the digital experience as well.
Yes, and there's some things that are so obvious that talk about risk. Somebody might say the word lawsuit, legal.
Yes.
Do not wait.
No, this is so true. You asked about customer case studies. I'll give you a few that I'm definitely not going to say who they are, but when you look at conversations and you see things like customers in a contact center saying, I didn't pay for this. I didn't think I was getting credit card insurance, or why am I being charged $2 a month? Those are not only customer dissatisfaction drivers, they can be regulatory black holes because disclosure is super important. And if you don't see those disclosures in the sales sessions and they show up in the service and complaint sessions, you're looking at potentially a big fine, right? So it's important to track these things proactively. There's a case management or closed loop requirement in a lot of these regulatory scenarios too, where if you find a potential legal or compliance risk, most regulatory agencies require an investigation and adjudication process. That's a kind of closed loop too, where you want to flag the issue, investigate it, and either remediate it by getting back to the customer or close it out because it's not a risk. That's a type of CX. It's not traditionally been thought of as CX, but it is a very, very important CX capability that is now possible with language analytics and kind of going into the interactions themselves.
Mm. All right, rapid fire questions as we get to the end here. So leadership. I mean, obviously, without great leadership, there is no customer. There's no CX. There's no employee team. So advice, what's the best advice you want people to know that you give or received yourself?
I would say CX excellence does very much start from the top. And it's not just a CX practitioner or CX owner. Some of the most innovative and I think aggressive programs typically start with a CEO or a COO or CMO saying, this is important to my business. Having said that, if you're not a leader in CX and you think you can have impact, drive the impact, focus on the outcomes, it'll get noticed, evangelize within the company. Any change initiative is also an opportunity to drive education inside a company. And I think when you're a CX leader, it's not just about collecting the data and distilling the insights, but really driving change. And if you can be a change agent, you'll have impact.
And if those listening don't understand how they have a customer experience role, please call me.
Yes.
Please.
Absolutely.
And most important advice that you want people to leave here with, because it's about doing, not talking and thinking. What's that one thing you must go do besides learn more about Medallia?
Well, I would say if you're in CX today, don't be complacent, right? The market, the technology, even the customer and the way customers interact with you, all of those things are continuously changing, right? So keep an eye on technology trends, keep an eye on where your customers are gravitating, and don't be afraid to recalibrate your CX systems at least every couple of years. Because I think if you don't, you end up becoming a bit more stale. You end up with the kind of the problem of diminishing returns on your program. And most importantly, you potentially end up with competitive risk because other companies are leading the charge. This is not a space that is for the complacent.
Mm. And last favorite question of mine, I ask everybody.
Okay.
And that is advice to your younger 20-year-old self. If you could go back in time, Sid, and talk to younger you, what would you say?
Oh my gosh. I didn't know that was going to be on the quiz.
No, it's all you.
At 20, I had no idea how to be an entrepreneur. I mean, I was an entrepreneur by way of kind of founding my company, Clarabridge, and other things. I was not a risk taker. I would probably have said to my 20-year-old self, you're having too much fun. Take a few more risks professionally. And who knows what might have happened. But to be honest with you, I have no regrets. I've had a good life and I've had a good career as well. So all good.
Well, interesting enough that take more risks, but here you are helping companies mitigate risk.
That is true. Well, at 20-year-old, you want to make taking risks. By the time you get to be my age, you want to be mitigating risks. That's true.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I can't wait to see you in person. And I will have more about you and the company in the show notes. So if people have questions, they'll know where to go. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Stacy. I've enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to seeing you next month in Vegas.
Yes.